Welcome to the Gain Momentum podcast, focusing on timeless lessons from senior leaders in hospitality, travel, food service, and technology. Today, we have a special episode. We're focusing on construction and renovation within hotels and hospitality. I'm joined by our special guest, Brad Fortner at Team Hospitality Group. Brad, how are you?
Doing well. Thank you.
Great to have you. So we structure this podcast around four key questions that we ask all guests. But I want to start before that. I'm hoping that you could just give us a little bit of background on Team Hospitality Group and what your unique sales proposition is for the company.
Well, we're a construction company and we have a niche. Uh, it is in hotel renovation. And there's some really specific skill sets that really qualify us to be skilled at that. And that's what we do. We're a GC, but we are very focused on a really specific niche in the industry. Renovations need to be, there's a lot of intricacies to doing that well. It's pretty fast paced. We can get into any of that you have questions about, but that's basically the answer to that.
Yeah, and hospitality, there are so many niches, so many niches, and the renovation component is something that every single hotel needs to go through because it's inevitable that you need to update, you need to have a property improvement plan, you need to stay with the trends, both design, technology, infrastructure, and upgrading your amenities. So, Brad, we'll dive into our first question, then we can drill into some of the specifics about what Team Hospitality Group does. Our first key question is, when it comes to scaling a business, what is a single piece of advice you would give entrepreneurs from your perspective as a professional in hospitality construction?
I would say take your time, pump the brakes a little bit. There's no substitute for experience. So do your homework. There's a post that I posted on LinkedIn. I reposted it. Uh, I think the guy's name is, it's Jeff Bellotti. He's the CEO of Wyndham. There's a nice interview of him that I reposted on my LinkedIn page where he's talking about how his career progressed. Jeff started as a busboy. So, and now he's the CEO. There really is no substitute for learning that ground level, whatever industry it is. But I think it's specifically really important in hospitality, hotels, restaurants. Um, Learn from the ground up, you know, be a maintenance engineer for a little while, be a project manager on a couple of renovation or construction projects, work in the accounting department for a little while. There's no substitute for experience. I know in this day and age, we want to Google everything, watch a YouTube video, and we think we know it. Really, take your time. That wisdom that you gain from experience, it's gold. It's priceless. So that would be the one thing I would say to do.
Yeah, nothing will ever beat the hands-on. And yet today, the expectation is that it's all so fast and people assume that, 2 weeks of training is all you need to learn the entire company, then they should be running the company. But in terms of experience and training and learning, one point I want to touch on is that your formal background is in psychology. And this is so important for hotels, whether you're in construction, you're a technology vendor, or you're actually involved in operations, is understanding the mindset of guests, of customers, and service culture. And I'm wondering, how has that formal education in psychology helped you to run and wear so many hats for a hotel construction and renovation business?
Understanding how people think and what their needs and values are is key to everything. We're a service company, essentially. Yes, our niche is construction, but the more trust we build, the better we listen and just create that relationship where you can tell us what's most important to you. that helps me get to that outcome that we're shooting for. Outstanding outcomes is what the focus is, but how you do that is you really need to listen. You need to develop those skills of networking and trust and surrounding yourself with really great professionals. That's goes to psychology, really is what it really is, the science of, understanding how people think.
Well, okay, so let's drill down to outcomes because, of course, this is where stuff hits the road, so to speak. And of course, the team hospitality has its niche. So, how does a good GC add value to a renovation project? In terms of attention to detail, planning, teamwork, and other skills that may involve understanding the client and expectations. Well, how does that add value to the outcome?
Well, those three things are what you need to do well. The planning is so important. The more you do that, the more you're going to alleviate things that might happen later. You're trying to cover all your bases. Sometimes change orders can happen just because sometimes pre-existing conditions can't be forecasted. All right, not always, but they're far and away lessened if you do a really a good job at planning. And what were the other two things you said? Planning and what else?
Oh, just teamwork and
Huge.
any sort of budget or attention to detail. The minor things, right? Teamwork and
Right.
budgeting, right?
The minor things. What we do is not rocket science, right? It's a renovation. 90% of what we do is taking out what's already there and putting something back in that's pretty similar to what was already there, but it's new, right? But the key is, you know, managing people. There's there's maybe 5, 6, 7 different trades on site at one time. And everything is, it's scheduled in a way that it needs to happen at the right time. So coordinating all those trades to work together as a teamwork, that's really that's going to make or break you right there as a GC. You really need to hone in on that and do that well.
For this specific podcast, a lot of our audience are either owners and a lot of them are on the technology vendor side. So a lot of them, they either have been up in the stratosphere for looking down at a reservation, a renovation in terms of the costs and outcomes and timeline, or they're in another cottage industry to hotels and they haven't necessarily been on the ground for a renovation. So with that in mind, sort of looking at it from a beginner's perspective or a novice perspective, could you walk us through an example, the sort of soup to nuts of how you get involved, where those 6 or 7 trades are that are on site, so that owners can understand the extent of what you do and look at how you value engineer a project, and then also so vendors or other industry leaders could understand where they might better plug and play into your process.
Sure. The planning stage is usually it begin. Let's say it's a branded hotel, okay, and there's something called a PIP. All right, a partial improvement plan that typically comes from your brand people, and they'll plan that maybe a few years out, but every few years they would like to see you give the hotel a facelift.
Out of the owner's
Usually,
wallet.
that's true. And we can talk about brands, whether they're a good thing or not, but you know what? Brands help they help you have confidence as a consumer with the goods or services that you're going to be rendered, right? So there's a reason people they choose to fly the flag of, let's say, Hilton or Marriott or whatever, right? So those brand standards are really a good thing if you think about it. That means if I go to a Hilton in Memphis, it should be the same standard of service that I would go to a Hilton in Seattle, right? There's some synergy there to what they're offering. Right. So let's say the PIP people, the brand people have put a PIP together, and the hotelier has that, and they know that they've got to do this, and that. If you send us architectural plans or blueprints or a PIP, and we look at that, we may have a few questions, maybe an RFI or two to send, up the tree and get an answer for it. May need to go all the way to the architect or whatever. But typically, we can put together, a quote, a proposal for services, usually in a week or two. We There may be some back and forth with some questions, about whatever it is. What kind of door hardware are we using? What's the existing there? Sometimes there might need to be a site visit, but anyway, that period of time can take as long as you want to plan, and we can help you with that. And then once that stage is finalized and you choose a GC, if it's us, we'll start to order materials and plan for that project to start. When that project starts, we want to have everything there, and procurement gets involved, right? A lot of your FF&E is coming from overseas. It may be coming from Brazil or China. And so coordinating that and planning the start date to have everything there, and then have the crew, all the tradespeople there, um, then it starts. Now, once it starts, there's some real procedural things that you do. Again, hotels don't close down for a renovation; they stay in operation. In other words, day to day business continues. So at that point, there are certain things that you do operationally to not interfere with the guest's experience while the hotel stays open, and yet you could do a hard renovation. You're blowing through the entire hotel right down to the slab, and putting all the interior finishes back new. You got a new hotel. And anyway, there's ways that you can. It's tricky, but that's what you do to get a new hotel at the end of the day.
Now, one thing to pick out from your answer with regards to FF&E deliveries, and you mentioned, coming from Brazil or China or Mexico. Do you have a framework or a guiding philosophy for optimizing between cost and delivery timeline?
Can you expand on that question? How, like, what you can do to?
Yeah. So I mean, oftentimes the going assumption right now, in as we're filming this in November 2024, is that goods, if they're prefab, might be cheapest from China, but if they take 6 months to get to you and you need them there in 3 months, you may go for something that's more expensive, that's prefabbed in Mexico or in Brazil, because it has that slightly shortened delivery timeline.
Well, that's the question. That's what you have to weigh out. And I would definitely do my homework and ask for examples of prior work, because sometimes there's difference in quality of goods and services when you start comparing apples to apples. I would definitely do that. What I'm trying to say is cheaper is not always better. And at the same time, faster delivery is not always better. Just, I would do your homework on that. And sometimes, um, you know, spending a little extra more is actually cheaper in the long run. You understand? Because then you're not having problems with it down the road. So, a lot to weigh out there.
And do you build model rooms on a lot of projects before you do the whole hotel?
We do. And that's an excellent way to troubleshoot, you know, issues. Design teams often come in when we do a model room, and I get to watch them pick out every little detail, which is a lot of fun. I love to work with design. If you haven't had that experience, you really should once in your life. It's a lot of fun. These people are geniuses. They can, identify a little orange strand in the carpet, and you don't see it at the time, but then when the room is finished, you realize that that little one color strand ties in to the pattern of the wall covering. or a lampshade, and it all pops. It's amazing. It's really almost jaw dropping the first time you experience that. Model rooms are not something that we make a lot of money doing, Adam, but we do it as kind of a loss leader, as a service, because the big picture is it does make the overall project much much better planned. It's planned a lot better because you can physically be in the model room and see it, touch it, feel it, and see what it's going to be like. So yes, we do.
Yeah, the whole idea there is, I guess, measure twice, drill once. Pick out a lot of those last minute corrections that you may need from the FF and the order. On the topic of loss leaders, we're going to shift into our second major question, and it's very open ended. So, Brad, what are some of the common pitfalls or failures you have witnessed that business owners should look to avoid when scaling their business?
Well, back to taking your time and growing. Sometimes slow growth is better than trying to scale too quickly. You know, I know everybody wants to do everything fast. You want to get there quickly, but sometimes slow growth in the long run it is really better. And where the rubber meets the road with that, here's two things to think about. Okay, some of these renovations, you may have a six, seven, $8 million renovation. Some of them are much more than that, right? The personnel to help you plan that project, the people that you have on staff, them being experienced and you cultivating your team around you that really operationally can take that project on and make it a success. It's very important. Um, a lot of times hoteliers will use an owner's rep. An owner's rep is not a bad idea. If you feel like you're a little light on just construction lingo, understanding how things are built, or you know the structural integrity of buildings and how that can be compromised if you don't know what you're doing, right? It may be a good idea to bring an owner's rep in, and they can help you every step of the way, from the planning stage, which again, very important, but all the way through that project from start to finish.
So, you talk about growing slowly and steadily to make sure that everyone really understands their role and you can trust your teams. And I sort of want to segue to understand that from the context of where you are, which is in Western Kentucky, and you're active in that area as well as Tennessee, and I imagine other states around there. And I'm wondering if you could color the answer about steady, consistent growth with respect to the growth that you're seeing in the states where you're most active.
Well, we've been renovating hotels for about 20 years, so we're coast to coast. And hoteliers, sometimes they're regional, but a lot of times they're all over the nation. Some of them are global. Um, so we do hotel renovations in California, and we do them in Miami and everywhere in between.
One of the pitfalls of growth might be unanticipated costs, things that come up. And if you have a very experienced team, you're more likely to see those in advance and know where a project may go wrong, or where more planning is involved, or where the second you start breaking down walls, you realize there's a lot of extra stuff that needs to be moved behind those walls. So, a
Absolutely.
question therein, yeah, a question therein is, um, for everyone listening, is what are some of the most anticipated areas where unanticipated costs can occur during a hotel construction, whether that's a new build, a renovation, or any other sort of PIP?
Honestly, we don't see a lot. We work with hoteliers that are really very professional, and they understand that making mistakes can be costly. So, but I will tell you, let me give you an example of something that could happen. I've personally not seen this happen, but just like to get your head around about what we're talking about. Let's say a hotel. hasn't been renovated in a while, or maybe codes have changed and you need to add ADA rooms. Maybe you need to add 2 a floor, and there's however many floors there is in the hotel. Many times, the the area of the bathroom or some area in that guest room will need to be expanded. In other words, you may need to move a wall or move a water closet. If the toilet moves from this wall to an opposing wall, then that means that the toilet's got to have a drain. And the drain hole through the slab is probably there's tension cable. I will almost guarantee you that tension cable is in that slab. And if you were to drill that without an x-ray, not knowing where that tension cable, well, the structural integrity of that building could be compromised. So I have not seen that, but it could happen. And after you work with people who are experienced, we all help each other look out for things that might be structurally compromising or cost, it would push your cost up dramatically. And there are things that you can do, to eliminate that and minimize that. You don't want to make those mistakes. And sometimes you make a change to the plans, it's actually a little bit more cost effective than what your plan was originally. You never know. I mean, sometimes it's more expensive. But I don't see a lot of change orders that just blow the budget out of the water. The planning is usually done pretty well, pretty precisely.
Well, you talk about planning and being cost effective, whether that is coming in later where there's a change order involved or specifically during the planning stage. And the term that I see tossed around a lot is this idea of value engineering. And I'm wondering if you could offer maybe some other examples or a general framework for advising owners to when they look at a project and are really trying to value engineer it in terms of what will keep it cost effective and what other items maybe are dare I say superfluous from a design perspective. Do you have any words of wisdom there?
I do. And I had to look that term up, to be honest with you. I wasn't familiar. Here's one area that I see it's like a trend, and I do understand it, and it makes a lot of sense to me. I don't know if you've noticed this, but a lot of tubs are going away in hotel bathrooms. Have you noticed this?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I think there's more than one reason for that. I think the first reason is because I think hotel patrons, they wanna see a nice, clean, updated bathroom, okay? And if you switch out a tub to a shower pan, and now you've got nice new shower surrounds in that shower, it looks fantastic. It looks clean. It's easy to maintain and it's easy to clean. It looks great. I know when I stay in a hotel, always love to see a nice new restroom. And if I see that big sliding glass door with the brushed chrome shower door frame and everything, and I've got that nice shower and the surrounds, I love that. But think about the cost effectiveness of this too. How much water does it take to fill a tub? And how much time do we spend, showering? You see what they've done there? That's a double win. That's a win-win. That's a smart move, and I fully sup we're switching out a lot of tubs for shower pans now. There's a lot of that going on. Makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I always looked at that from the design perspective, and people wanted those nice shower pans and the rain showers. And then I also thought about it from a safety perspective in terms of climbing into a bathtub versus just being able to walk in and out, as well as the
Brother,
cleaning time,
I'm
of course.
6 foot, 250 pounds. I can't tell you the last time I've been in the tub. It's been a long time, so, yeah.
Yeah, people are getting bigger statistically, height wise, right? I'm 6'4". I don't take baths, right, unless I'm in a thermal resort somewhere where I know it's going to be big. But I look at kids these days, and they're all getting their vitamins, and 6'4" is going to be on the short side going forward. There's kids these days. It's like, yeah, you're 6'5". I mean, good luck making the basketball team. You're not tall enough, right?
That one makes sense, and that's what comes to mind when you ask that question. It's already underway. We're
Yeah.
seeing that a lot, yeah, making the switch.
Yeah, and to tie that back to what you said about, the brand, not necessarily dictated, but brand guided renovations is the brands will insist that say, hey, you got to move away from this tub because the design trend is moving this way. Here's the reasons why it's going to add value, the water savings, the cleaning times, the safety, all that
Right.
stuff. But also, people are getting bigger. The other trend that I just remembered is if you look at the evolution of hotel desks, so the desks in rooms, they've gotten around 25 to 50% smaller because laptops have gotten lighter and people are preferring to work from their beds and from the divans, if you have them, divans or couches, versus working at an actual executive desk. So it's very interesting to see these trends, how they evolve, over a 10 to 20-year time span as hotels go through their evolutions and their pips.
There's a lot there. We could probably spend a whole episode just talking about those trends. There's a lot, yeah.
Well, I mean, that brings us perfect segue into our third key question, which is, Brad, what do you see as the key opportunities and challenges for hotels and also hotel construction or renovation companies in 2025 and beyond, both in terms of technology, labor, and design trends that hoteliers should be cognizant of?
Well, there's always challenges. I think the future's really bright right now, and especially, if you follow current events and notice what's happening with the market lately. I mean, wow, huge upside. Next 4 years, 4 or 5 years, this is exciting. The market was already, we went through COVID and we had that terrible time for, us to try to digest, endure, and get through, right? To me, I don't see how in the world like business travel, conventions, business group bookings and stuff like that. I don't see how that's not just going to explode. I mean, we're already seeing it come back, but in the areas that really cater to business travel and conventions and stuff, I think the challenge is to be to stay ahead of that and provide enough infrastructure for there to be enough available for it to happen. I think it's going to explode. I really do.
Well, so if we could break that apart, I'm also seeing the growth of business travel and convention travel, or the acronym there is MICE, meetings, incentives, conventions, exhibitions. But there's so much going on here in terms of how that's changing, particularly in the rise of remote work and hybrid work, where meetings and conventions are a way to really bring your teams together when they aren't necessarily meeting in a traditional office commercial space environment on a daily or biweekly, tri-weekly basis. So I see that huge growth potential as well. And from your perspective, in terms of recent jobs you've completed in renovations, what are some of the design features that you've seen that really work as an outcome, either looking at the rooms specifically or other hotel features that you've built to really help facilitate that mice growth for a hotel?
Well, first of all, let's think about it this way. We've already talked about PIPs, right? And since COVID, those have kind of sometimes they've been pushed back, okay? And something else that has happened a lot of times, instead of doing the entire renovation, they've chosen and brands have been really good to work with hoteliers, owners to do this, but maybe they stage it out for a year or two and they do it in phases, right? So because of COVID, because of whatever, they've decided that they want to kind of delay that and do it in stages. But think about the market. I'm thinking that, yeah, that's a possibility, and you always want to analyze it and see if maybe that's the right move. But with the market the way it is, I'm thinking that it might be a better return on investment to look at doing more rather than less and delaying in order to tap into and stay cutting edge current with your facilities, technology, all of that. I think maybe we need to be careful about the market can change dramatically. We saw that this week. Now the outlook's totally different than it was just last week, right? So I don't know that before we even talk about specifics of facilities, what I see, people doing or what I think, that's probably the big one that you need to really go back and look at and analyze and think, is my plan, is my path in the next year or two for all of my facilities, has it changed? Is it different? Because it may be, and especially in mind of ROI, return on investment.
So I mean, you talk about really stretching things out in stages and staggering the PIP over, a 3, 4 year time frame because people were uneasy during COVID or something like that. And now we're seeing this just a trend where people are simply replacing a lot of the capital assets and the core equipment versus doing a full scale PIP just because those had to get done and were delayed during COVID. But I'm wondering, let's say somebody wants to move on an accelerated timeline to really get up to speed, as you say, rip the band-aid off, but also do things cost effectively and bring the hotel up, knowing that overall for the next 4 to 5 years, we're going to see huge growth in that area. And that's just, you can put some stats and some feasibility behind it, but you know that there's going to be growth. You know this is going to work. So I'm wondering if you could talk about any sort of specific advice you'd have for a hotel that has to remain in operation and wants to stagger the work, but also wants to do so on a very, very fast pace without compromising guest service. Do you have any specific advice there?
First thing I would do is look at your room occupancy, okay, and analyze that very carefully because you may have been thinking December through February was your only option. But now that the market is very different, maybe you might consider doing it well into the spring or maybe earlier in the fall. The seasonality, from coast to coast is pretty much the same until you get to Arizona, Florida, and then seasonality flips. The busy times for hoteliers in South Florida is 180 degrees different than it is just right like here in Tennessee or Kentucky. Wintertime is when most people plan to do renovations. But if you really want to get aggressive and maybe move things up, see if you could possibly work with a GC who's really good at being respectful to your guests, and they're very experienced about keeping you in operation and being able to do a renovation with minimal interference to the guest experience. But maybe look at that seasonality a little bit different and consider doing it outside the months that we typically would want to schedule those. That's one big one that I would look at.
Yeah, that is a really big one. Because yeah, you're making assumptions about when the low season's going to be, and you think, okay, we're a 3 season hotel, but things are changing so fast on the ground. And I would add to that, you not only need to look at your revenue on the books, but also what your market's doing, looking at star reports and hot stats to see how the rest of the market's moving and what convention business is coming up and what big compression events are coming into town that you may want to schedule around. So that's a really good piece of advice. Before we close out here, I'm wondering, I'm fairly active in the luxury category, and Team Hospitality Group has done a lot of work in that category as well. Do you have any specific advice for hoteliers in that specific category of luxury and luxury construction, luxury renovation?
Well, we've already kind of touched on it, but I'll go back to it again. The higher the level of luxury, the tighter the specs are to all the finish work. So it's very important that we're speaking the same language when I'm delivering service to you. And so the higher the level of luxury of the hotel, it becomes even more important that your team, your director of construction, your project manager for projects, renovations, whatever, that they need to come behind us and help us look for defects. But I can get it close. But really, it's teamwork. When we do that punch, Adam, it doesn't bother me at all when you find defects. That's what blue tape is for. That's why they make it, right? So we're very comfortable with you giving us feedback. In fact, if you're in the hotel business, we're very used to getting feedback, are we not? That's how we tailor our service, right? Think about sitting down to a meal at a Michelin restaurant. How does the waiter interact with you versus going to a fast food chain and ordering a meal? There's a difference. There's a difference. But it takes that communication, and we have to listen to you very carefully. It's not just about asking the right questions, it's about that relationship. We work together to get to that outcome. That's a really great question. I love that question.
Well, I love your answer too, because that's the common theme to all hospitality is that it's about relationships, communication, understanding one another, and going back to right at the beginning, planning, and
Oh,
making
yeah.
sure all on the same page and having trusted partners.
I tell people, Adam, all the time, it's not that you can't hurt my feelings, but I need the information. Hit me right between the eyes with it. I'd rather know, and it sting a little bit, than I don't know. If I don't know, I don't know. I can't fix it. I need the feedback. I need the give and take back and forth.
Yeah. And, that's a great place to end it off because it is all about feedback and learning and being honest with one another and taking the time to properly communicate so you're all on the same page. Brad, I can't thank you enough for coming on. This has been a delightful, powerful 40 minutes to discuss the construction and the renovation. Thank you. And if you have any closing words about what Team Hospitality Group does, please, by all means.
Well, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on. I don't know if I helped much or not. I think maybe I muddied up the water more than anything. But I will
No,
say I
but
appreciate the opportunity and hey, keep the great information. I'm following your podcast and I'm watching your content on LinkedIn. Outstanding, dude. I learned so much from you. So keep it up, dude. I'm a big fan.
thank you. Really, really means a lot. It is a labor of love, as you know, but spreading the good word about how great our industry is and all the various components that go into it, from idea and design through to funding, through to operations, more operations, renovations, technology, and food service. Everything works together to deliver what we call an experience. And
We're very blessed to be in the industry. We really are.
so, Brad, thank you for making that magic happening. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Gain Momentum podcast. To stay up to date, make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Gain Advisors, head to gainadvisors.com.